Hi guys, Sean here from digiDirect. Now today we're going to be taking a look at the Fujifilm X-T2, which is a camera that's about to be released. Now this is the successor to the X-T1. It's a mirrorless aps-c size camera. So that means it has the same size sensor as cameras like a Canon 7D or a Nikon D5500. They've made a lot of improvements on the X-T2 over the X-T1, in particular two important areas being video and autofocus capabilities. Now we're going to touch on both of those in a sec, but first let's start with a look at the physical body of the X-T2. So the body looks pretty similar to the X-T1. There's not a huge amount of differences. They've improved the ergonomics a bit. The dials are a little bit nicer. They've got a new toggle lock switch system. One thing they have added, which I really like, is this little joystick. I think it's officially called the focus lever, but it's basically a joystick that lets you change the autofocus point, and it also lets you jump around through menus. Now this was not on the X-T1, but it was on the X Pro 2, which was a camera they released earlier this year. It's a lot better than just using the actual four-way buttons on the back, so that's great. They've got a tilting screen. They've added a third articulation direction, which kind of flips out into the side. Would have been nice if it was a fully articulating screen, but it is what it is, I guess. They've improved the electronic viewfinder in terms of its brightness and refresh rate. They've added a second SD card slot. There's now dual SD card slots here. They're both UHS 2 compatible. They've updated the USB port to USB 3, and they've finally given us a standard 3.5mm microphone input jack. You also do still have a 2.5mm input for a remote. And the body itself is fully weather sealed, just like the X-T1 was. Now I should mention that I was using the vertical boost grip when shooting with this camera. Now that's a battery grip that goes on the bottom. Like most battery grips, it lets you stick in a couple extra batteries, but it does add a couple extra things. For example, it adds a headphone jack. It also gives you an AC port, and it comes with an AC charging cable, so you can plug this into wall power, AC power. One other cool thing that I don't see on many other grips is it's got this little toggle switch between normal and boost mode. So when it's in normal mode, it drains the batteries one at a time. So it'll take 1, 2, and then 3 batteries. Now, when it's in boost mode, it pulls from all 3 batteries simultaneously. And what this actually does is unlocks a few extra or improvements to some of the features on the camera. For example, when you're in the boost mode, you can actually shoot at a higher frame rate, and you can also record video for a longer period of time. Okay, but let's start with the sensor. So it's a 24 megapixel sensor, so that's up from a 16 megapixel sensor that was in the X-T1. This is similar to the 24 megapixel that was in the X Pro 2, so a nice high resolution sensor. We're now at the point where these cameras have got comparable sensor resolutions to most DSLRs. So if you're a little bit hesitant about going into mirrorless because of that 16 megapixel point, that's pretty much gone now. You're going to have a lot of detail in these sensors. You're going to be able to crop in a lot in your photos, blow up large prints. It's going to be very comparable, so that's going to remove that hesitation for a lot of people if that was the case. Beautiful, beautiful photos that come out of the camera, as most Fuji cameras do. They tend to have a reputation for really nice looking photos. So let's talk about one of the 2 things that I consider to be the biggest improvements to the X-T2. First one being autofocus. So Fujifilm cameras have never really been considered great autofocus cameras. They take beautiful photos, but they've never been used for kind of sports and so on because their autofocus has been notoriously a little bit slow. Fujifilm has definitely been trying to resolve this. The X-T1 did a good job. They improved on that in the X Pro 2, and they've really upped their game in the X-T2. So you have a choice between either 91 or 325 autofocus points. So a lot of selection. This is a fast autofocus system, not just by Fuji standards, by any standards. They also have continuous autofocus modes, and they have a variety of modes, and you can set your own custom mode as well. But these will track moving subjects in a variety of different ways depending on how they're moving. I found them to be really effective. When shooting with this camera, there was never a point where the autofocus was A, either too slow, or B, inaccurate. I really had no issues with the autofocus, and that's going to go a long way for people who want to use Fuji. Like I said, sports photographers typically have shied away from Fuji because of that. It doesn't have that autofocus. I would recommend that you take a look at Fuji now. It can shoot sports now, which is crazy, which is a first really for Fuji. But a really good job from the autofocus department here. I was really impressed. And speaking of sports and action shooting, the camera can shoot 8 frames per second in normal mode. If you do have that grip on and you're in boost mode, it can shoot 11 frames per second. And when it's shooting with the electronic shutter, it can shoot 14 frames per second. They've also improved the processor in here, and they've increased the buffer size, so you can now shoot up to 83 JPEGs or 27 RAW photos. Okay, now we come to the second major area of improvement that the X-T2 has, and that's video. So again, Fuji has never been known for video. It just hasn't been something that they've focused on in the past, and they're clearly really trying to change that with the X-T2 here. So the camera will record 4K video at up to 30 frames per second or 1080p at up to 60 frames per second. Both of those will shoot at 100 megabits per second, which is a very competitive quality level. That's going to give you very high quality video. They've also added 4K 8-bit 422 output via the HDMI port if you want to record to an external 4K recorder like an Atomos unit or something similar. Now that's very cool because, for example, even the new Canon 5D Mark IV does not have that. In addition, when you are outputting that way, you can output in what's called an F-log profile, which is basically Fuji's version of a log profile. It's a very flat picture profile, good for color grading. So these are kind of some more advanced video features that even some other big cameras don't have, that I think really shows that they're dedicated to turning this into a camera that people can actually use for video. And the video is really beautiful. It's really nice and clear and sharp and crisp. You can also use any of the Fuji picture profiles like Velvia, Provia, all their classic picture profiles. You can shoot video in those profiles as well. So you've got a lot of range, a lot of different types of looks that you can get right out of camera without even having to grade it. Now, one caveat that I will mention that you'll want to be aware of, when shooting 4K video, it can only shoot for 10 minutes at a time. That's because the battery gets hot. Now, when you've got this vertical boost grip on here and you're in the boost mode, that increases to 30 minutes of shooting time. So if you're shooting a lot of kind of interview type stuff, kind of like what I'm shooting right now, you'll probably need the grip to do that. So please just do bear that in mind when you're thinking about that. Now, personally, I always love when I shoot with a Fuji camera. I love the photos that come out of them. They just look so smooth and clear, and something about the colors is just amazing. But I shoot a lot of video, and it never really made sense for me to have a Fuji camera because they just weren't video cameras. With the X-T2, I think that's changed. If you're a videographer looking at a new camera that can do video, I think the X-T2 should at least be on your list of cameras to check out. They're definitely a contender now. Now, the last thing that I'll say about this camera is something that I say about every Fuji camera, but it's just that every photo that comes out of a Fuji camera, I swear, looks so good. I don't know what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it. It has to do with the film that they developed for decades before digital came out. They put that technology into their digital cameras, but it's something about the colors. Just every photo seems to have a lot of character, more so than when I usually shoot with other cameras. That's the case for all Fuji cameras, and it carries over on the X-T2. It's worth mentioning. It's just the photos that come out of these cameras are really, really nice. So overall, I'm really impressed with what they've done with the X-T2 here. They've improved it in almost every way, and more importantly, they've really taken a hard look at what their strengths and what their weaknesses are, and they've specifically tried to improve on what their weaknesses were, and that's namely, again, autofocus and video. And the improvements they've made to those two aspects really are significant, enough that this camera is now a contender in both of those areas where previously Fujifilm cameras weren't. So really, if you're sports or a videographer, it's time to look at Fuji cameras, when I know in the past that hasn't been something you've been considering. If you'd like to learn more about the X-T2, come into one of our stores. We'd be happy to talk to you about it, have you try it out. We've got stores in the Melbourne CBD, Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Chatswood, Miranda, the Brisbane CBD, and in Cannington, which is just outside of Perth. That's a new store. You can also order the X-T2 on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Take care, guys.